There are moments when a conversation sounds less like an interview and more like a signal from another time. Moments when scientists, historians, and believers all seem to reach through the noise, pointing at something that refuses to stay buried. From ancient linen that bears the face of a man no one can explain, to fossilized legends of giants that vanish each time official hands touch them, to an interstellar visitor so strange that even the world's top astronomers whisper it might not be made by nature, and the quiet war over settled science, where questions themselves are treated as heresy. Each of these stories, the Shroud of Turin, the Forbidden Bones, the Celestial Intruder, the climate that divides nations, carries the same shadow. A question not just of truth, but of who is allowed to speak it. Some say these are relics of faith, others warnings from the cosmos. But when institutions move to silence curiosity, and when those who ask why are told not to, the mystery deepens. Because what if all of these threads, the sacred, the scientific, the cosmic, are part of the same tapestry? What if the truth was never meant to be divided at all? Tonight, we step into the borderlands of belief and evidence, where scripture meets data and silence hides more than it reveals. Because somewhere between miracles, myths, and the mathematics of the stars lies a story that refuses to die. And today, we'll explore these stories one by one and uncover what might really be hidden behind them. The Harvard physicist who thinks we've already been visited. On a quiet night in 2017, astronomers spotted something slicing through our solar system. Fast, silent, and shaped like nothing they had ever seen. They called it Oumuamua. Most dismissed it as a comet. But one Harvard astrophysicist, Avi Loeb, wasn't convinced. Now, sitting across from Joe Rogan, he issues a warning that this could be more than a rock. He argues it might be alien technology, a messenger from another civilization, and that humanity's refusal to look closer could be a catastrophic mistake. What he says next challenges not only astronomy, but the very limits of scientific humility.
Things are getting very wild.
Yeah, there is a lot of misinformation. Some people said, I invented 3i Atlas, this object, in order to distract attention from the Epstein files.
Is that what people are saying?
Yeah, and I said, look, this object is the size of Manhattan Island. It's at 4.5 times the Earth-Sun separation. If I was able to put it out there, I would be more powerful than the Pope. And because we're talking about a giant object that you can see from any place on Earth. You can buy online a telescope that will allow you, 0.5 meter in size, that will allow you to see it. It's out there. It cannot be faked.
Well, those people are fools. You can't listen to those people.
I don't listen to those. I don't listen to many people,
Initially, a lot of people were dismissing your concerns, and they were saying that this object is nothing but a comet, and it's very normal. But then as it got closer and as we got more data, it seems like you're correct.
Well,
this is a very unusual object.
There is something really important to recognize here, that usually when you deal with scientific matters, they have very little impact on the future of humanity. Very little. If the neutrino has a little bit of a mass, doesn't really matter. When we discovered the Higgs boson, the biggest impact was to confirm some idea we had back in the 60s. And, obviously that affected, those people who got the Nobel Prize. But most of us continued as if nothing happened. However, here, if we ever encounter alien technology, everything will change. It will affect the financial markets. It will affect politics in a major way. So my point is simple. This is different than other scientific matters, and the intelligence agencies know very well that events with very small probability have to be considered seriously because they could have major implications. Just think about October 7th. The Israeli intelligence agencies had a theory that the Hamas will do nothing. And they got data that indicated something is going on out there, but they dismissed it because of their theory. Now, as a result of their mistake, which was clearly a blunder, a lot of people died on both sides that this could have been avoided if they were to consider a black swan event, an event that you put a small probability for it happening, but you look at anomalies in the data and say, look, the implications are so huge, we have to consider it. And, this idea was already considered by the philosopher mathematician Blaise Pascal. He talked about God. And he said, look, of course, you might think that God doesn't exist. The probability for that is small, but the implications, if God exists, the implications are so huge that we have to discuss it. That was the argument, Pascal's wager. And the intelligence agencies know that. Believe me, the Israeli intelligence agencies will not make that mistake again. Now, here comes an object from outside the solar system, and it shows anomalies. The scientists would say we should be as careful as possible at talking about anything other than a rock. Now, they say that when they know that humanity launched a lot of space junk, a lot of technological objects to space, and we also know that there are 100 billion stars like the sun in the Milky Way galaxy alone. Most of them formed billions of years before the sun, and there are billions of Earth-Sun analogs. Now, we all believe that we came out of a soup of chemicals. That's the scientific narrative of how human intelligence came on this earth. And so it's quite likely that, we are not the first one. Sorry to break the news, Elon Musk was probably not the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. And therefore, we should consider the possibility that things like us existed long before us. And you can ask the question, how long does it take our own technology, the Voyager spacecraft that we launched out of the solar system, how long does it take it to move to the opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy? Thousands of light years away, it takes less than 1 billion years. And that means that all these civilizations that had their history initiated billions of years before ours could have done it. And all we need to do as responsible scientists is to check if among all the rocks that come from outside of our backyard are really rocks, or maybe one of these objects might be a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. And the reason I say that is, we live at our home, on Earth, next to the sun. We look around us in the cosmic street, and we see a lot of houses just like ours. There are billions of them, probably. Now, my colleagues, those scientists who think traditionally, they say, well, microbes came to Earth very early, therefore they must be everywhere. So let's define our highest priority, searching for microbes on other houses in our cosmic street. And I say, good, you can do that from the vantage point of your home. You can look through the window and search for microbes in your neighbors' yards, but you would need to put $10 billion to develop a big enough instrument that would be able to detect the chemical fingerprints of microbes, on exoplanets. And think about the possibility that there is a resident in one of those houses. That resident might show up in your front door at some point, or you might see an object that arrives to your backyard or your mailbox from that resident.
A black swan event.
A black swan event. Or you might see some construction project from a distance. That might be easier to detect than microbes. So we should hedge our bets. We should invest billions of dollars on both fronts. At the moment, the scientific community is willing to allocate more than $10 billion to searching for microbes, but no recommendation is made to allocate any federal funding to the search for intelligence. And I say that is an oversight.
Let's go back to, I don't want one more time. Oumuamua. Okay, yeah. I don't want to screw it up. How large was that?
That was the size of a football field.
Okay, so
of all the 100 meters.
Small in comparison to 3I Atlas.
Oh yeah, that's my point, that 3I Atlas is 1 million times more massive, at least 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua. Right. And I immediately, as it was discovered, it was July 1st, and my wife asked me to go on vacation to Aruba 2 days later. And as I was going on the plane, and as I arrived there, I realized, wait, that doesn't make sense, because we should have seen millions of Oumuamuas before we saw this one. It's so big. And I also realized there is not enough rocky material per unit volume in interstellar space to deliver such a giant rock into the inner solar system within a period of a decade. You would expect it at the very optimistic scenario where you package all the material into objects that are 5 kilometers in diameter. You would imagine once per 10,000 years. So I wrote immediately a scientific paper. My wife was not happy that, on our vacation, I was sitting on my computer, but I just couldn't resist it.
Right.
And by the way, this paper I submitted for publication. That was July 3rd or something. And then the editor said, oh, the paper is fine, but you have a concluding sentence at the end where you say, well, unless the object is smaller than estimated, maybe it was targeting the inner solar system. That was my solution to say, one way out of this dilemma of why is it so big is if it was targeting the inner solar system by design. And indeed, the trajectory is aligned with the plane of the planets around the sun to within 5 degrees. The chance for that at random is 1 in 500, okay? And it's moving in a retrograde trajectory opposite to the motion of the planets, which is ideal for it to release mini probes that will get into the planets. It gets close to Mars, it gets close to Jupiter, it goes on the opposite side of the sun relative to Earth when it's closest to the sun. And that's the time when a spacecraft could do a maneuver to take advantage of the sun's gravitational assist. All of these are interesting indications that may imply that some intelligence designed the trajectory. So I had one sentence at the end of the paper saying, maybe the trajectory was designed. And the editor said, no. The paper will not get published unless you remove that sentence.
Wow.
So now when you listen to comet experts that say, well, this claim or that claim was never published in a peer-reviewed journal, guess what? They are the editors or the reviewers who are blocking the discussion on possibilities. And I think it's inappropriate, especially in the case of alien technology, because it could be a black swan event. It could be something that affects the future of humanity, and if we behave very conservatively, we might not last very long.
Well, it's also arrogant.
It's arrogant.
Yeah. This object shows that there's no iron.
Oh, no. So then the composition of the plume of gas around
this is before you knew about the composition.
That's right.
That you wrote this paper.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
so as time is going on, you are being shown to be correct.
Well, we found more anomalies.
More anomalies. So this is not a normal thing.
Not a normal thing. So for one thing, there was a glow that looks like an extended...
Avi Loeb isn't a fringe scientist. He once chaired Harvard's astronomy department and led major research on black holes. So when he insists that Oumuamua's behavior is unlike any known natural object, the world listens. Or at least, it should. The object entered our solar system on a hyperbolic path, meaning it came from interstellar space. It accelerated slightly as it passed the sun, but not in the way comets do. There was no visible tail, no trail of vapor or dust. Loeb points out that the glow of gas surrounding it pointed toward the sun, not away from it, completely opposite to how comets behave. He saw purpose in its motion, geometry in its trajectory. Mainstream astronomers offered safer explanations. Some said it was a fragment of nitrogen ice or a natural shard from a dying planet. But every model had cracks. None could explain its perfect shape, its spin, or its impossible brightness. Loeb took a risk that few in academia ever take. He suggested design. His calculations showed the object was thin, possibly metallic, and reflecting sunlight like a manufactured sail. To him, Oumuamua might have been a piece of alien technology, perhaps a probe or debris from a civilization billions of years older than ours. And he's right about one thing. Even a small chance of alien contact would have consequences far beyond science. Financial markets would shake, religions would react, governments would scramble for control of the narrative. Intelligence agencies already know this, which is why, as Loeb says, they treat even low-probability events with extreme seriousness. The black swan analogy he gives, invoking intelligence failures before October 7th, isn't hyperbole. It's a warning. Dismissing anomalies because they don't fit a theory is exactly how humanity misses history when it's staring us in the face. Now, years later, the mystery deepens. A second interstellar object, Borisov, was found, but this one looked entirely natural, confirming that Oumuamua remains unique. Recent studies have even shown traces of nickel without iron, a combination rare in nature but common in aerospace alloys made by humans. So, is Avi Loeb wrong? Maybe, but if he's right, even slightly, we may already have proof that we are not alone, and that someone, somewhere, once sent something through our solar system, watching silently from the dark. The climate debate they don't want you to hear. For decades, the phrase, "the science is settled," has echoed through politics, classrooms, and newsrooms, a declaration meant to end debate before it begins. But in this rare conversation, Joe Rogan sits across from a climate scientist who challenges that certainty. He argues that climate science, like all science, is not about belief or consensus. It's about questioning data, following anomalies, and refusing to let politics dictate truth. What follows is not denial, but a warning that blind trust in authority may be more dangerous than the warming itself.
Now, what happened was there was, I would say, with the first Earth Day, 1970, there was a real change in the environmental movement. It began to focus much more strongly on the energy sector and much less on saving the whales. And there was a big difference. I mean, the energy sector involved trillions of dollars. The whales, not so much.
Right.
And at that time, it was cooling, this global mean temperature, which doesn't change much. But, you know, you focus on 1 degree, a half degree, so it looks like something. And it was cooling from the 1930s. 1930s were very warm, and it was getting cooler until the 70s. And that's why they were saying, well, you know, this is going to lead to an ice age. And they focused on that for a while. And then in the 70s, and at that time, well, what do you say? You know, if you're worried about an ice age, they said, well, it'll be the sulfates emitted by coal burning, because that reflects light, and the less light that we get, the colder we'll get. But then the temperature stopped cooling in the 70s and started warming. And that's when they said, well, you have to scare people with warming, and you can't use the sulfates anymore. But the scientist called Suki Manabe showed that even though CO2 doesn't do much in the way of warming, doubling it will only give you a half degree or so. But if you assumed that relative humidity stayed constant, so that every time you warmed a little, you added water vapor, which is a much more important greenhouse gas, you would double the impact of CO2, which now gives you a degree, which still isn't a heck of a lot, but still it was saying you could increase it. And that's when people started saying, well, now we better find CO2. It's increased because of industrialization and so on. And that began the demonization of CO2.
Do you think there's just always people that are going to point to anything like this that's difficult to define and use it to their advantage?
Oh, yeah, and this was a particular case. You wanted to deal, you know, the energy sector is trillions of dollars. Anything you can do to overturn it, change it, replace fossil fuels, it's big bucks.
Right.
And one of the odd things, I think, in politics, I don't see it studied much, Congress can actually give away trillions of dollars. If you look at the McKinsey report on, eliminating CO2, net zero, they're saying it'll cost hundreds of trillions of dollars. Well, if you're giving out that much, you don't need that much of your politician. All you need is millions for your campaigning. And all you're asking are the recipients of people who are getting the money that you are giving them, 0.5%, 0.25%, you're golden. So that's much better than giving out 100,000 and having all of it back.
Well, the key, though, is also making it a subject that you cannot challenge. There's no room for any rational debate, and if you discuss it at all, you are now a climate change denier.
Yeah.
Which is like being an anti-vaxxer or, fill in the blank with whatever other horrible thing you could be called.
Now, that's a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, I was looking at it. On the one hand, you're told the science is settled. Thousands of the world's leading climate scientists all agree, which often makes you wonder. I mean, you went to college. How many climate scientists did you know? I mean, thousands. But on the other hand, if you read the IPCC reports, they're pointing out, for instance, that water vapor and clouds are much bigger than CO2, and we don't understand them at all. So here you have the biggest phenomena we don't understand at all, but the science is settled. Who knows what that means?
Well, it's also, there's this very bizarre dynamic of the Earth's temperature itself, which has never been static.
No. How would it remain static? That would involve a hugely reactive system.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But everyone seems to be buying this narrative that the science is settled and the Earth is warming. We have to act now.
You say everyone. I'm not so
I don't
sure.
say everyone. A lot of politicians.
A lot of
particular.
politicians are very attractive to this because it gives them power.
Right, and it's hard to define.
Yeah.
And you can argue, and if you argue against it, you're a bad person.
Well,
That's a good one.
You do all that, but we spend part of a year in France. My wife is French. Ordinary people, once you get to the countryside, don't take this all that seriously.
Right.
Here too, I suspect ordinary people have more skepticism than many people who are more educated.
Yes, but unfortunately, these ordinary people sometimes are impacted by these politicians' decisions where they have to, in the UK, they were getting rid of cows. They were forcing people to kill cows.
They're paying 3 times more for their heating and their electric bills.
Right, right.
I mean, it makes people poorer. It's making it almost impossible to electrify parts of the world that need it. And that involves billions of people. No, I mean, it's doing phenomenal damage and pain. But, I think for politicians and for many people who are well off, they need something that gives meaning to their life. And saving the planet seems sufficiently grandiose for their ambitions.
How are these net zero policies stopping people from getting electricity?
Well, by making it expensive, by eliminating fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are cheaper. At least the experience in the UK is when you switch to, quote, renewables, it tripled the price of electricity.
Right, but what I'm talking about is like third world countries, parts of the world that are undeveloped.
They can't afford it.
And that's all it is. They can't afford it.
Yeah.
But they also, if they didn't follow these net zero policies, what kind of plants are we talking about? Are we talking about coal plants?
Coal, anything, whatever is available.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
essentially.
you think even though coal does pollute the environment and it releases particulates, right? That's an issue, right?
How shall I put it? It's always a matter of cost. We have a plant, I think, in Alabama that has basically as clean as any other plant that burns coal. You can clean it, you can scrub it, you can get rid of almost everything except CO2.
Okay, so the particulates aren't as big of an issue as they used to be in the past. Is that
I
what it is?
agree.
They're more efficient. Okay.
Yeah.
So so this net zero thing is stopping them from installing modernized coal plants in parts of the world that do not have electricity, and the overall net negative weighs much heavier in not bringing these coal plants in.
I think so.
And not bringing these people into the first world.
Yeah, and there are, of course, the alternative natural gas and so on, which are available in places. There are places where you're lucky, like in Norway or Canada, Quebec, where you have hydro, which is intrinsically clean. But there's a problem with politicians. I remember once being in D.C., and some Republican politicians came and said, you know what we just did? We banned incandescent light bulbs. They said, wasn't that a great thing? I said, that's the stupidest thing I've heard today. What's the point? Because at the time, what was replacing it? Compact fluorescents, which were awful. All they had to do was wait and do nothing, and LEDs would come along, and people would say, okay, I prefer that. Instead, they feel they have to do something.
And they would switch to fluorescents, which turned out to be terrible for people. Yeah. So incandescents aren't bad for you?
They were simply less efficient than in terms of the number of watts of heat they generate versus light. I mean, LEDs are phenomenal that way.
Right, they're the best. Yeah. Well, it's interesting when they have these decisions that they make like that do turn out to be negative ultimately, and that yet people still allow them to make silly decisions that don't seem to be making sense.
Yeah, I think there's an old cliche, money is the root of all evil.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. This is the disturbing thing that I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting, especially a lot of very polite, educated people that have followed the narrative that you follow if you're a good person and if you're a person who trusts science. And that is that, like, we have a serious problem, we have to address it now, or there will be no America for our grandchildren. This is the thing that we keep hearing.
You mentioned a tough thing there, the business trusts science.
Yes.
It's not a great idea because science is not a source of authority, it's a methodology. It's based on challenge.
Right.
And so...
Where did this narrative come from, then? Trust the science.
The success of science. In other words, this is a relatively new way to approach the world. I mean, a few hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion is, and I think it's been stated many times, you test things, and if they fail to predict correctly, they're wrong, so you find out what's wrong with them. You don't fudge them, and you don't change the rules. It's led to immense improvements in life, development of all sorts of things, and so it has a good reputation. Politicians have less of a reputation, so they wish to co-opt the reputation of science.
Yes, that's a very good point, because try finding a good politician that everybody agrees is rock solid. You can find plenty of science that everybody thinks is amazing.
Yeah.
Cell phone technology, nuclear power, so many things that people go, that's incredible that they did that.
Well, that's also confusing technology with science.
The result of science.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which is also an issue, right? And when you can get politicians to attach themselves to narratives that are supposedly connected to science.
You mentioned Gore at the beginning.
Yes.
With that thing, he was showing this cycle of ice ages and CO2 and temperature going together. And it never bothered him that the temperature changed first and then the CO2.
Yeah, Greg Braden was on the podcast recently. He was explaining there have been times where the CO2 was much higher in the atmosphere, but the temperature was colder.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like we can point to, like, look at the dinosaurs. We don't want to live the way the dinosaurs lived. Look how much CO2 they had. And then the other really inconvenient thing with CO2 is that the Earth is actually greener than it has been in a long time.
I mean, I think we'll speak to that. But, I mean, essentially the increased amount of CO2 in the industrial era has added greatly to the arable land. And in fact, there's a funny story. Do you know the name E.O. Wilson? Have you ever heard that name?
I do. I have heard it, but I don't know where.
He was a biologist at Harvard. He wrote about sociobiology. His specialty were ants and bees and things, social insects. And he was giving a talk, and it came up for reasons that were not obvious to me. He was talking about the population of humanoids. And he was mentioning that you go back, a few 100,000 years, and you began the first humanoids, and they got to about a few million. But then during the last glacial maximum, the numbers went down to tens of thousands. There was a complete wipeout of humans. So I asked him afterwards, I said, do you think this could have anything to do with the fact that CO2 is so low that there was no food? And his response was to turn around and walk away.
That's an inconvenient truth, sir. It's just, to me, it's very strange to see an almost unanimous acceptance of that we have settled this, that the science is settled, from so many people on both the left and in academia, and even on the right. There's a lot of people on the right that believe that.
Yeah, I know. And it should be the first thing that makes you suspicious.
Yeah, right. There's a consensus.
Yeah, I mean, this
Especially
is not how
about something
science is done.
Something that's never static.
The guest's argument cuts into the very core of modern environmental discourse, not whether the Earth is warming, but how we interpret it, and who benefits from that interpretation. It's true that early environmental movements in the 1970s focused on pollution and conservation. At that time, climate data did suggest a brief cooling period, a result of industrial aerosols reflecting sunlight. By the late 1970s, however, the trend reversed. Global temperatures began to rise, marking the start of what we now recognize as the modern warming era. Where the guest is correct is in pointing out how politics seized that narrative. Energy policy is worth trillions. Declaring carbon the villain opened a gateway to one of the largest government spending programs in history. Reports like McKinsey's on net zero indeed project costs in the hundreds of trillions over the century. That financial gravity inevitably attracts political influence. But the claim that CO2 doesn't do much in the way of warming misses key data. While water vapor is a more powerful greenhouse gas, it responds to temperature. It amplifies, but doesn't initiate change. Carbon dioxide, the weaker molecule for molecule, acts as the trigger. It's like a thermostat that sets the stage for water vapor to take over. This mechanism has been confirmed through satellite readings, paleoclimate, ice cores, and atmospheric models. Still, his point about the settled science slogan holds weight. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC itself, admits that cloud feedback, ocean heat storage, and regional climate patterns remain uncertain. The science is far from complete, and honest scientists know it. What is settled is the trend of warming, not the full understanding of its scale, speed, or consequences. The guest also warns of a moral and economic divide, that net zero policies could keep billions in poverty. That's no exaggeration. In parts of Africa and South Asia, restrictions on coal and natural gas have slowed electrification. While the wealthy world invests in renewables it can't afford, history shows that cheap energy is the foundation of progress. Without it, education, health, and stability collapse. Yet the solution isn't to dismiss climate action, it's to diversify it. Clean coal, nuclear energy, and next-generation fusion projects could bridge that gap, allowing developing nations to grow while cutting emissions long-term. And then there's the cultural warning buried in his words. The idea that trust the science has replaced question the data. Science, by design, is never authority. It's process. When politicians and activists weaponize it to silence critics, they turn discovery into dogma. That's not science. That's ideology wearing a lab coat. So yes, the Earth is warming, but this conversation exposes something deeper. That power thrives when debate dies, and if questioning becomes forbidden, we risk losing the very thing that made science powerful in the first place: doubt. The evidence, they say, could prove God. Across centuries, whispers of the impossible have persisted. Tales of ancient giants buried beneath American soil, a blood-stained cloth said to bear the face of Christ, and a relic guarded in Ethiopia that no one dares to touch. On this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, the discussion turns biblical, not as scripture, but as mystery. Rogan and his guest explore what happens when archaeology, faith, and fear collide. They ask, if proof of the divine truly existed, would the world even be allowed to see it?
I got off on a giant kick one time reading about giant. And it's like anytime the Smithsonian got involved,
Oh
It
yeah.
was just shut down.
Yeah.
You know.
The giant stuff is weird because there's a lot of documentation of people finding giants, like enormous
Giant bones.
10, 15 foot tall humans. And then there's also the Nephilim in the Bible that are giants that consumed everything. You know, that were, I mean, David and Goliath. There's giants in the Bible. And it makes you think, like, okay, is it a giant like the mountain from the Game of Thrones?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Just
like
a big
that's
guy.
not just a, yeah, maybe.
Because people were shorter and relatively back then.
Right, but probably some people weren't.
Yeah.
If they lived in some places where they had
Well,
more resources and better genes. Yeah.
Pituitary gland problems, you know, where we have guys 7'11" plus, you know.
Yep, but this seems different. The
Back
giants in the Bible and the giants in historical accounts, it seems different. It seems like it's a totally different species of human. And again, if we just found this guy recently that's 1 million years old, and now we know. So forever they were saying that human beings, I mean, the timeline used to be Homo sapiens emerged 50,000 years ago, and then they moved it to 150, then they moved it to 250, 300, as they find more information. Now they have to push it to 1 million. You know, and if one day they find a fucking head as big as this table, like, what do they do? What do they do about that? Do they even tell us?
I don't
Like,
think they
I
would.
don't think we would.
But why wouldn't they? That's what's weird. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they? Isn't that crazy? But we all agree. We all agree that if they did find a giant, they probably wouldn't tell us.
Yeah.
Like, but
Not until they did their own, you know, figured it out for themselves or tested on what they
know
wanted.
if they want people to know, but I don't know why they wouldn't want people to know. Like, why am I convinced that they would hide that?
Well, if there is Antichrist on his way, and his goal, he already knows he lost. So his goal at this point is just to destroy as much as possible, you know, get as many souls as possible. And finding stuff like that would prove the Bible more true would turn more people to Christianity or to God, the one true God. Then I could see where if there is like some type of spiritual force that is in somewhat control, then I could see that's the only way I can make sense of it. Is like, why cover up progress? Why not tell people the truth? Because
Well, I think it's ego, and
Yeah.
that might be also related to good and evil in a lot of ways.
loving
because-
yourself and not you're supposed to love God over yourself.
Right, and being the person that has the knowledge and the person that distributes that knowledge and is the gatekeeper of it is a very intoxicating thing for a lot of these academics. And if all of a sudden something comes along that, and this is the speculation about what happened with the Smithsonian, that they took that stuff and just fucking tucked it away.
I would think they
femur
would.
bones.
They would want to have, you know, secretly do their own tests without anybody knowing about it.
I
'Cause
know,
once
but
you
for
open
what, to what end? At what point in time?
before everybody else knows, they would already have the answers. I don't know.
But wouldn't there be a time where someone would want to, like, be the guy who discovered it all and get all the credit for it? Like, that's why it doesn't make sense.
To me, if somebody knows God, it is freeing in a lot of way, and you realize that, you know, no government is above you or no man is above you. God is above you, and you serve God. And if you can keep people away from God, you're that much more susceptible to being a slave to something else and
Yeah, like
worshiping
whatever,
something else.
whatever evidence or anything that kind of proves that God exists.
Yeah,
like,
anything that's
just
going to
keep
prove
that
God's
away.
existence, I think that's going to be the main thing they shut down.
Right. Like, the Shroud of Turin is an excellent example.
Yeah,
that one's
that's
an interesting
wild.
one.
That's a weird one, man. There's
I
a
would-
weird one. There's a lot of people that go out of their way to try to disprove it, but when you get into the dating of the cloth, so it used to be they were saying that it was only a few hundred years old, but now they're saying that the way the cloth is made, the cloth is made that's exactly consistent with the time that Jesus was alive, and that more tests need to be done to find out the exact age of it. Because the problem is, like, you don't know, like, what piece they studied, and you're not studying the entire thing. And also the image of it is bizarre, because the image of it, you really only see Jesus when it's a negative of it. And they don't know how that image was put on there. It wasn't stained. It wasn't burned on there. They don't know what caused it.
It's like a blast of radiation.
Yes,
Right.
somebody recreated it with gamma radiation, I think. But the only problem, so it would just be it would need to be an extreme source of light to do that. But the only
Right.
problem is that would have vaporized the heat from the light would have vaporized it realistically. So they're wondering, well, if light did do it, how was there no heat?
Right.
So if Christ did raise and pass through it, there's also X-ray images in the shroud apparently.
Well, you see this when you see the shroud in negative. Like Jamie, pull up an image of it. It's very strange. Like it shows the lash marks on his body.
Yeah.
It shows his facial features. It shows the holes where his wrist is, where he was crucified. It's very strange stuff.
So
Because like for someone to do that as a hoax and to just not paint it, just to do it in some very weird. Go to that. Yeah, that one right where your cursor is over that. Make that big.
Recently said it's fake.
They've recently said
They
it's
go
fake?
back and forth
But
on
the
it.
thing
Yeah, it's
is,
been
like,
back and
who
forth.
is the person who's they, right?
Yeah.
The Catholic Church is who
What's that,
owns
Jamie?
it.
Says they've been debunking it for 650 years.
Well, but 650 years ago, they didn't even have carbon dating. So what were they doing to debunk it back then?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that want to debunk it.
It says there's a
So what
document
does it
they
say?
found.
A document?
Well, they were talking. I mean, I don't know.
Where they
Just-
talked about it being bullshit?
Yeah, I've
The
also
thing is,
seen
people,
videos-
I'm sure, called bullshit on it
I've
a
seen
long
videos
time
where people
ago.
have talked about ways that some of that stuff could have been done.
Sure, but how would someone figure out that 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, whatever it is?
It could have been 300, 200, 150,
Sure.
60 years ago.
Well, it's 650 years. If they've been debunking it for 650 years, you got to assume it's at least 650 years old.
Well,
So the thing is, like, see, it's been dated between 1355 and 1382. So
The text was the document
the text, what text?
that we're talking about here, not the shroud.
What is the text about? Medieval document has revealed that the authenticity of the shroud that many believe wrapped and crucified was being called into question perhaps as early as 1355. Okay, well, that means that it existed 1355.
yeah.
Depictions by clergymen. See, it's hard. Deceptions. Oh, excuse me. Deceptions by clergymen. His writings, now considered the oldest written rejection of the relic, predate the previous earliest documented criticism by the Bishop of Troyes, Pierre d'Arcis, in 1389. So either way, we know it's at least 600 plus years old, and we know that the way that it was put on there was not stained, it was not painted. It's very strange. And if you look at it like that, they didn't even know that until they came up with photography, until they could take an image of it and make it a negative. They didn't see the face of Jesus and all the depictions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this image right here is like, you look at that, the Shroud of Turin, you're like, yeah, I could say call bullshit, whatever. But then you see the negative, go back to those other images. So this is what it looks like when you run it through, when you use modern photography and turn it into a negative. That's really weird.
Yeah.
That this wasn't, that they didn't know about this in the 1300s.
Yeah.
A new study says it's something else. So they're going to have studies forever that debunk it. And one thing that academics love to do, they love to call everybody retarded.
Yep.
Everybody's an idiot. This is all fake. This is bullshit. But whatever that is, man, when you're, just go back to the negative ones. The one that you just had. The one down, right? Yeah, that one, please. That's weird as fuck to me, man.
So
That's weird as fuck that you couldn't see it normally, and you only see it when they make a negative of it. That is so strange. That someone would go out of their way to fake something in that way, where it only exists in a negative.
Well, they don't even know how it happened.
Right, exactly. They don't know how to. I mean, they're saying they could reproduce it today, but I don't think anybody has. And also, how are you going to reproduce it to such an extent with so much detail that matches the biblical depiction of the crucifixion?
Yeah.
Including the holes in the wrist, the lash marks on his back, the wound in his side. It's all really weird. At the very least, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really interesting stuff.
To me, that seeing that, I really don't even care how old people think it is, or like figure out how they did that first. To me, it's like, if this is
Not only that, how'd they do that 600 fucking years ago?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
2,000 years ago, or whatever age it actually is.
I seen one article last year where they found dirt particles that matched, that trace back to Jerusalem. So
Yeah.
it's like I say, they've been debunking it and saying it's authentic and debunking it. It seems like for the last 5 or 10 years now.
Oh, it's very weird stuff.
It's just where are we
How
at right
about
now with it?
that one church in Ethiopia that's supposed to have the Ark of the Covenant there?
Yeah.
And all the people that guard it, they all get cataracts and they wind up dying of
I
radiation.
haven't heard that
See,
one.
I
yet.
don't-
You ever heard of that?
I don't know about that, because The Ark of the Covenant was when God the Father's presence was here on earth, not through Jesus. The Old Testament, the I Am was down here, and that's what he resided in. And you had to do all these things to be in his presence, or you would literally just die because, he's holy. And to me, it's like lightness and dark cannot exist in the same place, so whatever. But God the Father's presence isn't there anymore, so I don't understand why it would still be messing people up.
Well, we don't know what they were writing down, right?
Yeah.
The problem with all ancient religious texts, let's assuming there was real events.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a lot of these things were told as an oral tradition for 100, 500, 1,000 years before they're ever even written down. And then they write them down. They write them down in Aramaic, they write them down in Hebrew, and then they have to translate it. And they translate it to Greek and Latin and then eventually English. You're missing a lot along the way. When I read these things, when I read the Bible, or if I read the Book of Enoch or any of these ancient texts, I'm always trying to say, okay, what were they trying to document?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was the original event? Like, what actually happened? And the problem is people are really bad at telling the truth. Like, human beings, when they see something fantastic, they always add their own little flavor to it. People add their own little thing to it. If they are of a certain belief, they're going to attach that belief to whatever this thing was. So it's no question that these people held whatever that was in such high regard, and it meant so much to them that they, like the book of Isaiah, where it's verbatim, that they wrote it verbatim for 1,000 years. Back when they started out, they were writing things down on animal skins.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things about the Dead Sea Scrolls that's so fascinating, is they had to do genetic testing. So they're writing these things down on these animal skins, and they had to make sure that the skin of this one is the same cow as the skin of this one. So if they do like genetic testing to make sure it's the same cow skin. So, okay, we got all this skin from this cow, and it's in this group of text, so start decoding it.
That's an interesting way of doing it. That's wild.
Yeah. It's wild.
I would have never thought of that.
And like Wes Huff said, how they used to write things, like they'd leave stuff out back then because it wasn't required back then. They would just write down the basics. I watched that Wes Huff thing, and that was very interesting.
He's fascinating.
He's brilliant, man.
Yeah.
I've watched a bunch of stuff on him.
Very
learned
brilliant. But it's again, what were they trying to document?
Yeah.
There's clearly something was going on back then. Something happened.
Did you ever read that story? It was somewhere in the Bible. I can't remember where. It's in the Old Testament. Somebody stole the ark. Well, some tribe stole the ark, and like the next day, the next morning, like everybody was dead from stealing the ark, and they pretty much said, "Hey, come get this thing, take it back."
Yeah, we don't want it.
Yeah.
We're good.
Well, that's what people believe is in this church in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Because there's these Ethiopian Jews who also, their Bible is the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
Do we have an image of this ark?
No, you can't see it. Nobody can get. I say, send in the SEALs. We need to fucking
SEAL Team 6.
Find out what the fuck is in there, bro. Put these guys in hazmat suits and let's get to the
US
bottom
knows
of
you
this.
got it, it's going to be ours.
Well, you would imagine.
We're going to take it.
I would
Or
like
they
to
might
see
not know it all.
Well, what would happen with remote viewers if remote viewing is real? Get remote viewers in a
man.
room, and
We have talked about
There's a haunting thread running through this conversation, the idea that some truths are too dangerous for institutions to reveal. Joe Rogan's guest believes discoveries like the remains of biblical giants or the Shroud of Turin would be deliberately hidden because they threaten to rewrite not just history, but humanity's relationship with God. Let's start with the Shroud. It's a long linen cloth imprinted with the faint image of a crucified man. For centuries, believers claimed it was the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. When photographed in the late 19th century, something extraordinary happened. The negative image revealed a lifelike face and body, detailed down to lash marks, nail wounds, and blood traces on the wrists and side. It was as if the cloth had recorded a flash of light from the moment of resurrection. Science stepped in to explain it. Radiocarbon tests in 1988 dated the cloth to the Middle Ages between 1260 and 1390. But those tests were later questioned. The sample taken may have come from a section rewoven after fire damage, not the original fabric. Later analyses found traces of pollen from plants native to ancient Jerusalem and limestone dust that matched first-century burial sites. And when scientists tried to reproduce the image using heat or pigment, they failed. The image wasn't painted, burned, or pressed. It sits only on the surface fibers, thinner than a human hair, as if formed by a burst of radiation that left no scorch marks. That mystery keeps the Shroud of Turin balanced between faith and physics, too complex for medieval forgery, too miraculous for modern certainty. Then there's the legend of the giants, the Nephilim, the mysterious offspring of angels and humans described in Genesis. Across the 19th century, newspapers reported the discovery of enormous skeletons unearthed in North America. Some claimed the Smithsonian collected and hid the bones, but no physical evidence has ever surfaced, and every supposed photograph has turned out to be a hoax or a misidentified archaeological find. Still, the myth endures because it touches something primal. The feeling that history has been edited, that the world we're taught is only half the story. Even the Ark of the Covenant enters the discussion, said to rest in an Ethiopian church, where guards who approach it fall ill from radiation. The story's impossible to verify, yet the legend persists. Radiation sickness, divine power, or coincidence? No one can say, because no outsider has ever seen the artifact. What unites these mysteries isn't proof, but secrecy. Whether it's faith, ego, or fear of chaos, humanity has always hidden what it can't explain. If something truly divine walked among us, would our institutions expose it or protect us from it? And perhaps that's the real question Joe Rogan's guest was circling. Not whether these relics are real, but whether we'd ever be trusted with the truth if they were.